Recording. My name is Miss Adrienne Madrid. I am the career counselor at the high school, Culver City High School, and also CTE counselor and dance pathway. This is one of our pathways is dance. We do have Stephanie here, and she's a professional dancer, choreographer, and instructor at AM. I believe I got the AMDA.
Yes, I teach at AMDA. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I know that we have some students who are in Miss Carol's class and also students who are not. So that's great. Just kind of talking about the career and all that stuff. So I want to kind of start with asking some questions about kind of introducing yourself, what you do, and your path to where you are now.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Awesome. I know, it is a lot. It's great. Hi, I'm Stephanie Landwehr, and like Miss Adrienne said, I am a performer, a dancer. I teach and I choreograph. Not the order of what I do changes all the time. Some things take the priority of the order changes all the time. Let's see how I got here. How did I get here? I'm from Colorado. And when I graduated from high school, I decided to pursue having a performing career in Los Angeles. So how I did that is that I auditioned for a training program here in LA that no longer exists in the way that it did for me, which was I did Edge Scholarship. I don't know if you know Edge Performing Arts Center. I did their years-long training program, and from there I started working professionally as a dancer. So going to auditions and trying to get jobs and freelancing, and mostly here in LA. But I did a lot of everything. I did commercial dance, I did theater dance, I danced for companies, I did lots and lots of stuff, a variety of stuff, which I'm really grateful for. And at one point I did decide that I wanted to try out New York. So I moved to New York and I danced a little bit in New York for a few years. And then I moved back to LA. And I moved back to LA. I still was pursuing, most of the time when I was pursuing performing as a dancer, especially in my 20s and early 30s, I was really only focused on that. I did assist choreographers a lot, but I wasn't really pursuing a choreography career until later, I started to see a transition coming because of my age, which happens for dancers, is that there's, especially commercial dancers, I think, that the jobs that you are going out for and auditioning for start shifting. So when I started noticing that there was a shift, I started thinking about what was coming next. And that's when I started pursuing some choreography and I started teaching a lot more, which I'm really grateful for. I love both of those things. I love teaching a lot. So, which I didn't know when I was in my 20s because I was only interested in dancing. That's all I wanted to do. And that's what I did. So, yeah. And now so now I've sort of shifted into, I do choreography for projects for organizations that I teach for. I also do choreography I do some musical theater choreography, which is interesting because musical theater was never really my, where I thrived as a performer. But I've been doing a lot of more musical theater and choreographing for musical theater companies and doing other things like videos and all that good stuff too. And teaching as well. I teach freelance, which means I'm teaching open classes and I guest teach. And I also teach at AMDA and I also teach for a nonprofit organization, which is where I met Carol, Miss Carol Ziggy. So yeah, that's about me to here. That's good enough. Yeah.
What do you teach specifically at AMDA? Can you talk a little bit about AMDA, what it is and what?
Sure. I teach lots of stuff. I've sort of transitioned into teaching in lots of different areas, but AMDA is a conservatory and a BFA program. So the students it's a strictly performing arts school. So there's a dance department, a theatrical department, and a acting department. And so the students that can do a conservatory, which is associates, which shifted to an associate's degree, or they can stay for the full term and get a Bachelor of Fine Arts from AMDA. And what I teach there is mostly, as far as dance goes, I teach everything from jazz is probably my primary. I'm one of their primary jazz teachers. I teach jazz, I teach musical theater, jazz techniques, I teach Broadway styles, I teach heels. And then I also teach a lot of other classes because of the experiences I've had and the vast career that I've had. I also teach things like classes called industry and networking and career prep. And I do some directing there. They have several productions that happen every semester. So I've done some directing there, and I do a lot of choreography for their shows. That's pretty much where it lands.
Great. So what was your first touring job as a dancer? And then can you talk a little bit about what the audition process was like?
Oh, well, you know, touring is actually, I would say that most of my work was probably more, like I did a lot of television and film. I did a lot of, like I said, I worked with companies. I danced for the LA Opera. I did more of that stuff. I have lots more experience there, but I did do the Spice Girls reunion tour, and I danced I did a sit down, meaning like, what do you call it? I'm blanking on the name. Residency, when Cher has a residency in Las Vegas for 2 years, which now everybody does, like, you know, Britney Spears has one and everybody does it, but she was one of the first. So it wasn't a tour, it was sit down, but we were there for 2 years. So I was back and forth between LA and Vegas for 2 years, because she would do a month off and then a month on and then a month off and then kind of like that. So I was going back and forth. But the tour, Spice Girls reunion tour is the one that I worked on. It was a very short one though. So it wasn't a super long tour. And yeah, that's about the audition process.
And actually you can go into maybe you're just kind of your first job and either what was it and how was that audition?
Wow, I don't know if I can remember the audition, but that was a long time ago. But one of my first jobs here in LA, my first professional jobs was probably for Disney. I did they put together a live show that was to promote a new film that they were releasing. And they actually, the show was actually going to be in New Orleans. And so they hired, I don't know, maybe 100 dancers from LA, which was a ton. That's a lot. So, which was really fun because they took us all to New Orleans and we all did like a 2-week job in New Orleans together, which was really fun. And that job was, I don't remember the audition process all that much, and it was probably the auditions that stick out to me the most are always the ones where the job ended up being a smaller group of people, because then you really had to fight for your job, right? I don't really remember that one because it was so many people. They were looking for 100. So by the time they got to the end of the audition process, there were still a lot of people in the room, right? But for example, I did a commercial, which was a very popular commercial before all of your students were born, way before all of your students were, but it was very popular. It was for Gap, and they did a series of dance commercials, and it was with the first one, and it was called their Swing Khakis commercial. And that audition in particular, I remember very well because I ended up getting the job, and there was several hundred people that auditioned, and I was there all day, which means I made it through several rounds of cuts. I made it till the very end, which was probably went from several hundred people to probably about, I would say 12 to 16. I can't remember exactly, 12 to 16 people. And then I was one of 4 that got hired. So that process was intense and super memorable. And one that sticks out, obviously, for obvious reasons. And I was also very excited to get it. It was the very first time also probably that I booked a job where it was such a small cast and there were so many people that auditioned. It was one of those jobs that everybody wanted. And it had a huge impact on my career because the commercial was very popular after that. So then it boosted my career, and I had an agent, and my agent could then say, she's the redhead in the Gap commercial, you should hire her. And then they started hiring me directly sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I would get hired directly, which means I didn't have to audition. That was really cool for a while. So that one job made a huge impact on the course of my career that came after it, because it just opened doors in a way that, in a very special way, that sometimes just one job can do for you.
So when you're auditioning, do you have to have an agent, or can you go for young dancers we have here now? What do you recommend if they want to start working in the field or after high school? Do they have to get an agent? Can they go to open calls? How do they find out?
It depends. My comment would be, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to work commercially, and I'm assuming everybody understands what that means, but just to like umbrella statement, commercial, if you're a commercial dancer, that means that you're working in not only commercials, but television, film, music artists, music videos, stuff like that. If you want to do commercial dancing, then getting an agent is very helpful. I would say really try to get an agent, because they're going to have access to jobs that you wouldn't be able to have access to by yourself if you're submitting for yourself. But there's things that agent won't send you on. If you're interested in dancing for a dance company, an agent's not going to send you on those auditions. So then then you have to be more proactive about seeking out those relationships and those which companies you like, and those facilitating those relationships and learning more about their intensives and their process of how they bring people into the company and stuff like that. And then there's, the other stuff that there is work for sure that you can find on your own if you are proactive and you're connecting. Disney, for example, if you're on their website, really looking at what they have available as far as auditioning goes, you can definitely do that on your own. So it really just depends on what you're seeking, what your goals are, as far as whether or not you need an audition. Same with Broadway. If musical theater is what you're interested in, here in LA, you don't necessarily need an agent. You can definitely find musical theater auditions in the LA area, San Diego area that are open, that you don't need an agent to attend or to find the information for. In New York, also, you can probably manage without an agent if Broadway is what you really want, but agents in New York are also able to help you get into those auditions as well.
Is there, when you're looking at agents, even obviously there's good ones and bad ones that take your money and not, do anything for you, but what would you recommend as far as that first step towards getting an agent, if that's the way you're going to go?
There's 5 main dance agents in LA. If you're interested in other realms of the arts and performing arts, then know that dance agents are specifically for dance. So if you're looking into agents for other things like acting and commercials, that's different, because there's way more to choose from. But if you're looking for a dance agent specifically, know that there's 5 main agents in LA, agencies. And I would go to their websites. Each of them have their own way of doing things, but most, I would say in general, they're going to have a link on their website for you to submit materials. What you'd have to submit is, I think, double check, but I think that what you would have to submit is a headshot, a resume, and probably video content of some kind of you doing you and being awesome. And then they would respond to you, and chances are, I don't know exactly how they're doing things now since quarantine has happened, but before quarantine, the most likely response would have been an invitation to either an audition or a class, in the sense of like, we're going to go watch Marty Katoka's class at Millennium, please be there, that sort of thing. Or they all also have auditions. Some of them only do it once a year. Some of it do it like 2 or 3 times a year. So it just depends on the agency. But I would go to their website, and you can submit through their website.
So you can probably just Google dance agents then?
I can try to list them. Block Agency is my agency, it's BLOC. There is MSA agency. There is Clear Talent Group. There is the Movement Talent Agency, and there's Go To Talent. Those are the 5 main dance agencies in LA.
And do they work with both minors and adults?
They do, most of them. I know Block does for sure. They're my agency. I know they have a multiple, they represent dancers of all ages, including kids, including young kids, so all across the board. And I think that's true of most of them, that they would represent minors, but I'm not exactly sure. It would definitely limit what jobs you could do if you were a minor, but I think that they are open to representing minors.
So I probably should have started with this question, but how did you know that you wanted to become a dancer?
I did, but I didn't. It was a different, I'm a lot older than your students, obviously. And so dance education was different then, in the sense that I knew I wanted to go into commercial dance. I wanted to do a lot of, but I knew, let me rephrase that. I knew I was most interested in commercial dance. Like I had dreams of being in music videos and dancing with artists and stuff like that. And at that time, there was not really universities that had commercial dance programs, and now there are. At the time, there wasn't. The only kind of programs that were for concert dance and modern dance and stuff like that. And I wasn't really interested at that time in going that way. So I wasn't sure if I wasn't sure if it was the right thing for me. I knew that I had danced my whole life. I knew that I had loved it more than anything. I knew that I felt good when I was dancing, and that I hoped to have it to be a part of my life. But I wasn't really sure. I also had parents that really wanted me to stay in Colorado and go to university, and which would have been a totally different route. So I made a deal with them, and I said I applied for all the universities that I was interested in, and I made a deal with them that I got accepted into one, and I committed to the school, but I also said I'm going to go to LA in the summertime, and I'm going to audition for this training program for a professional dance training program. And if I get it, I'm going to LA. And if I don't, I'm going to go to the university that I accepted. And I ended up going to LA and auditioning for the program and getting into the program. So I gave it a shot. My plan at the time, I remember, was that I was going to give it a shot for a year, which is like, a year is very little, really. So I gave it a shot for a year, and then I just kept going. I couldn't let it go. I just needed to dance. I had a lot of, especially when I immersed myself in a world where I was taking class with professionals, with people who were working as professional dancers, I looked at them, and I remember, even at a early age, I knew I was an amateur and I knew I wasn't to their level, but I also had this very strong belief inside of me that I could be there, that I could do that. And that, I think, was what really drove me, is that I really wanted what they had. I wanted to do what they did, and I wanted to be that good. So I ended up staying, and it's been my life ever since, and I love it. And, you know, I'll be dancing until I'm old and gray and probably can only step touch. But yeah.
And another question, how can young dancers prepare themselves for auditions? And how do you deal with the rejection?
That's a hard one. I think there's two parts to it. I'll start with the easier part, is how to prepare, actually. But I think that there's a lot of different elements of preparation. When you're preparing for an audition, as all of you know, I think you do a lot of research on what is the job, what am I auditioning for, which then will help you decide what to wear and how to present yourself, and the style of the movement, what style is the movement going to be, and that sort of information, which really just comes down to research. But the other preparation, I would say, as I got more skilled at being an auditioner, the biggest preparation is mental preparation, which I think goes hand in hand with rejection. So I can only speak to me, and how I deal with rejection is that I learned to be resilient. I learned to figure out, and this is what I think every performer has to figure out, not just dancer, but performer, is has to find their way to turn no's into motivation. Because you're going to get, everybody's going to get a lot of no's. You're going to audition many times before you actually book a job. So turning every no into motivation to keep striving and keep working harder. And also that resilience goes hand in hand with the mental preparation for going into an audition, and actually like taking the time to learn how to mentally prepare yourself to walk into a room and not have expectations about how it's going to go, to walk into a room and just dance your best, to have fun and treat it like, you know, a really important class, maybe, you know, where you're just, it's a class and you're just trying to do your best. And if you can leave that audition feeling like I really just danced my hardest and I performed my butt off and I did the best that I could, and that feels really good, that's when things start working. That's when you start getting called back, and that's when you start getting job offers. But it's really, that's a really hard mental process to get there, where you can, you know, relax, calm your nerves, and just go in to want to be your best and have a great time.
And when you audition, is there kind of a typical audition? Do they tell you, okay, now do this type of dance, or they give you a script, or what is there a typical?
Yeah. Most typical auditions are going to have a choreographer already associated to it or attached to it. So the choreographer has already been hired. So generally speaking, you're walking into an audition, the choreographer is there most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time the choreographer is there, probably with some assistants, and they're going to teach choreography. You're going to do their choreography for them and for potentially the production team, which can be the director and the producer and lots of people depending on the job. So yes, and the same with script. I mean, of course there are jobs, there's auditions where sometimes you're going to be improvising and just trying to convey a mood or an emotion and just improvising your movement. But most often, I would say you're doing choreography that somebody's teaching you.
So they're looking at how well you pick up the choreography and how well you move, basically. Is that right?
Yeah. How articulate you can be with their choreography, how you can turn their choreography into, how you can add your own spin onto their choreography, so you can insert yourself into their movement, because that's always important, is adding the extra sparkle, and the extra sparkle is always the individual, the person, it's you. So being able to put you inside the movement, and yeah. And they're also, in all honesty, they're definitely looking for people that they want to work with on a personal level. So generally when you're at an audition, they're not only looking at the quality of your movement and how you perform the choreography, but they're also asking themselves if they want to work with you. So they're watching how people react in the room and how they interact with each other and how professional they are, and are they bringing positive energy to the room, that sort of thing.
Soft skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go to some of the questions that were asked. You mentioned that you teach industry and networking at AMDA. What does that mean?
That's a good question. Industry networking, it's basically breaking down into, you know, weekly classes. What it means it involves talking about networking. What does networking actually mean? How do you build your own network? How do you brand yourself? Because especially if you're talking about being a commercial dancer, then there's always a conversation of branding yourself, just like you would if you were a product. Because you are your own CEO, so you have to cultivate those sort of business skills, and also resumes and headshots, and knowing if you have a good headshot, do you need to retake a headshot? There's how do you manage your relationship with your agent? What should that look like? How do you find auditions that are, if you don't have an agent, like really going through the process of how you find auditions to submit yourself on. Basically, it's just navigating the transition from being a pre-professional who wants to be a professional into being a professional. That's like the short answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maya asked, what are some of the challenges you face as a dancer and finding jobs, and how do you deal with that?
Hold on one second. Say that one more time. I missed the first part.
What are some of the challenges you face finding jobs as a dancer, and how do you deal with it?
I think the biggest challenge that you, being a dancer, being a performer of any kind, in my opinion, and my experience, my answer to that question would be that it's not consistent, and that can be very challenging for a lot of people. So I don't go to work from 9 to 5 like some of your parents might. And especially when I mean, now I work more consistently because I teach probably, but when I was performing, I could be working a lot on a job, like for a tour, right? When I was working on the tour, I would say that I probably worked at least 40 hours a week, if not more like 60 hours a week for a month and a half. And then maybe I didn't work again for 2 months. So then you're not only do you have to be more dedicated to managing your financial stability and making sure that you like know how to manage that, which is also part of industry networking actually. But it's also, again, going back to the mental, how do you create mental stability so that you're not just sitting around waiting for something to happen, but you're continuing to work on, like I said, you're your own CEO. So how are you continuing to work to find auditions, to make connections with people that might be able to help you, take new classes, keep your training up, because nobody's making you do that except you. Those sorts of things that then come into play because all of a sudden you have time, way more time than you had before. So it's the most challenging part is that it goes like this, that you can be working a lot and then you're not working so much. And then maybe you're working a little bit and then it just keeps waving and waving and waving.
Yeah, I can imagine that can be kind of rough sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
When you're working on a job, is there a typical day, what it looks like for you? Like, what are your hours? I know you said 60, could be 60 hours a week, but is there kind of a typical day at all?
I think that's a really hard question to answer because it just depends on the job. And it depends on, again, like I said, like if you're working with a dance company, you're going to have a set schedule that you know for their season is what you would call it, right? So you would know that we're going to have rehearsal Monday, Wednesday, Friday from this hour to this hour. We have open class on Thursday morning. Like there would be a set schedule that you would have to participate in, that you would be required to be there for. And then and that would be a long term. If you're on tour, similar with working with a music artist, that would be, or a Broadway show, it'd be similar in the sense that you have a set schedule. You know when you're doing shows, you know when you have to be there for rehearsals, and it would depend on where you are in the process. When a show is being developed and built, your rehearsals are going to be long, but once the show's up and running, you might have some extra rehearsals for cleanup, but most of the time you're just there to do the show once the show is built, right? So even within the job, the schedules can shift. And then, a big portion of my life, for example, was TV and film, music video, commercials, stuff like that. And those are very short jobs that are very intense. So the longest shoot I think I ever was on, which means I was on set shooting something that had already been created, we were in the process of shooting, could be 16-hour days. That's on the long side, right? Most of the time it's like 10 probably, which is still pretty long. That's a long day. But it would be short spurts. So it could be just a few days or a couple weeks of doing, very, very long days. And then again, then that job would be over because it's just a short job.
So is there any kind of experiences you want to talk about? Like give an example of some of your jobs, that what it entailed, what did you do? What was it?
Well, I know that Adrienne posted, I think that she talked about, or she let you guys know that I did La La Land. So I'll talk a little bit about that because I know everybody really likes hearing about that story.
Yeah.
It was a good one. But that was actually a job that I didn't audition for. So that's, again, just my network. The choreographer for that job is a choreographer named Mandy Moore. And she's somebody that I've known for a really, really long time. And I got to actually be a part of the skeleton crew. is what you call it. If you don't know what a skeleton crew is, it's for things like films, especially sometimes television commercials, that sort of thing, but especially films. If they're planning on having a big scene with a lot of people in it dancing around, that's a lot of people to pay. So instead of hiring the 30 people that were in the scene to workshop it and figure out how it's going to work and how's the camera going to work and all the details that are involved, they'll hire a much smaller group of people. They hired 10 of us. I think there was 10 of us. And we basically we helped Mandy be the bodies that she needed to build the scene so that she could choreograph not only the dance steps and the staging, but also the camera. The camera was choreographed. So when we got to set, so actually before set, when we got to rehearsal with all the dancers, it was already set. She knew exactly what it was going to be. Her and the director knew exactly what the camera moves were going to be. So she knew how to fill each frame, where to put the dancers, what they should be doing, and all that good stuff, which is a fun part. I love the process. Probably when I was young, I loved the outcome. I loved the performance and the camera being on and all that stuff, and I still do. But I think that the more experience I got, I started appreciating the process more. So being part of the skeleton crew was really, really fun for me. So we were like, as the skeleton crew, we helped Mandy be the bodies for every scene every dance scene in the film. But then when it came time to cast all the dancers, she took all 10 of us from the skeleton crew and she sort of like dribbled us throughout the scenes, and which is really nice, she spread the wealth and she hired so many dancers that no dancer did more than one scene, which is great because she gave everybody work. So when it came time to film, I did the first scene, the opening scene on the freeway with dancing on the cars. And that was all really fun. But when we developed it, not for skeleton crew and also in rehearsal with the dancers, we did it in a parking lot. We used our own cars. Of course, we didn't get on the hoods. We used our own cars. We were hopping in and out of everybody's car, trying to figure out what to do. It was just really fun. And the director was very proactive and involved with the figuring out, like I said, choreographing the camera, how the camera moved through the dancers and all that stuff was really, really fun. And then when we got to shoot, so we had rehearsal, they hired the dancers. I think there was about 30 of us in that scene. And they hired the dancers. We went into rehearsal. Again, we were rehearsing in a parking lot for a few days. And then we rehearsed on the freeway for one day. I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 days. We rehearsed on the freeway for 1 or 2 days before we shot. So it was like, and the city of Los Angeles would only let us shut the freeway down on the weekend. So we rehearsed one weekend. We were on the freeway that is the 110 to the 105, that little carpool lane that goes over the top. Anyway, we were on there and we rehearsed one weekend. We shot the next weekend. It was 104 degrees outside when we shot. It was really hot. It was like extraordinarily hot. That's what I remember is everybody brought umbrellas because in between shoots, everybody's like trying to find shade. There's no shade on the freeway. So it was really hot and it was really fun. And the other really cool thing that happened, which is I've never had happen before in the many years that I've been doing this, is that after so the way that the scene was shot was that it was 4 really long takes that were then sort of, they were 4 really long takes that the transitions were created so that when they went into editing, it would look like 1 really long take, but really it was 4. But so there was 4 really long takes. And when we finally, we got done with all 4 takes, took a couple days. And they kept the dancers around. And everybody was looking at each other and we're like, what are they doing? We don't understand what they're doing. That had to be the last shot. I can't imagine that they are going to use this for anything else. And then we were all trying to figure out why are we still here? What's happening? And then, because usually we would have been wrapped by then. And the producer, director called all the dancers over. Like I said, there was 30 of us. And we were surrounded us around a monitor, a screen, right? Had us surround a monitor. And they wanted to they showed us their favorite take of each of the 4 consecutively so that we could see what it was going to look like. and I think I cried. And it was really it was really cool because you could tell how excited they were. They were so excited that they had to share it with us, which is really unusual for that to happen. So it just felt really special. So that was cool.
Yeah, I could imagine if that's great that they wanted to show you and share that with you. Okay, getting back to some more questions. How long, when you moved to LA, how long did it take to get your first professional dance job or project?
Well, I did a year of training where I was not auditioning, and then I started auditioning, and I can't remember exactly how long it took, but I started the Disney job I booked, and then I booked like a couple of small things, and then it started slowly building. And then actually the Gap commercial that I was talking about earlier was probably my first really big thing that sort of catapulted me. But to answer the question, I would say that the Disney job was probably like once I actually started auditioning and having auditioning being my full-time job, because it was my full-time job. I would guess it was between 6 and 9 months before I booked anything, probably, which is not uncommon. I think that from speaking with agents, I know that their spiel when they talk with students and pre-professionals, that oftentimes their answer is if it takes people about a year before they start really booking jobs. So once you immerse yourself in the world of professional dancing and you're really auditioning and you're making that your life, it takes about a year before you'll start seeing movement and booking jobs on average.
Right, it takes a lot of, I guess, persistence and
Yeah.
patience and that kind of thing. So a question was about how much you get paid. So I know there's a range and depends on what kind of project, but can you talk a little bit about the pay for range for dancers?
That's a really hard question to answer. That's like almost impossible to answer. It depends greatly on the job. And that's like, several classes worth of information. But, for example, dancing with dance companies probably is not a whole lot of money. I think a really great, like, established dance company is going to pay anywhere from, can pay you in different ways. But if the ones that I know of that pay weekly, I think Alvin Ailey, for example, has a starting rate of around $1,300 a week. I could be wrong. I think it's about $1,300 a week. But Alvin Ailey is a company that's been around forever. They are established. They have lots of funding. They have lots of donors. They have, they have a lot of money for a company. So the companies that are newer are going to have less money, and therefore the pay for dancers is going to be less. So it just depends on that realm. It totally depends on the company. I worked for companies where I didn't make any money, and I did it because it was a passion, and I was doing commercial dance on over here, helping pay my bills. And then I was dancing for dance companies that were new and exciting to me, but they didn't have enough money to pay their dancers really very well. We would get paid for shows sometimes and performances, but that was pretty much it. That was okay with me because it filled me up as an artist in a way that commercial dancing sometimes didn't. Broadway, I think starting rate for ensemble is around, I'm also guessing, I can't remember the exact number, I think it's $1,800 per week to be in the ensemble. And then commercial jobs, it just depends on the job, right? Average pay for a music video, shoot day, if you're getting paid what you should get paid, because that's a whole other conversation. If you're getting paid what you should get paid, it's about $500 a day. TV and film and commercials range depending on your contract. But I would say it's anywhere from $700 for 8 hours to upwards of like if you're a principal, it's going to be probably like $1,500 or something like that for 8 hours for a shoot day. But again, those jobs are short and, you know, they take up a short span of time. You get paid really well, and then you end up having to go back to training and auditioning in between, right? And then also there's the conversation about like TV and film and commercials pay residuals, which is really nice. But that's something that you don't see right away. It's something that you see months down the line, meaning that like La La Land, for example. La La Land was in theaters, so we shot it. I think it was released a year later in theaters. We shot it. It was probably released a year later in theaters. And then about 6 months after that, it goes to streaming and video. And then after it goes to streaming and video is when you get paid residuals. So like 2 years later is when I started getting residuals for La La Land. So it's not something that you can count on necessarily in the moment. It's something that's going to happen later.
What is the percent? Is there like a percentage that they give you for residuals? Like what's it?
It is so confusing to explain, but it's sort of like a percentage, but it's based on two things. It's based on, so the movie can do really well in theaters, but what it's really based on is streaming and video. So how well the film, or playing on an airplane, or, you know, like those sort of things where they're paying to use the film on other services later. I don't know if it's a percentage of that, but that's how you're receiving residuals. And it is also affected by how many days you were on set. So basically, which is how much money you made when you actually did the job, right? So somebody who worked through the whole movie, even if they were on the same, even if their rate is what you would call it, was the same as mine, but they worked 3 months as opposed to I worked maybe 2 weeks, then their residuals would be way higher because of how long they worked on the film. When it comes to commercials and television, commercials is its own thing. Commercials, residuals for commercials are much higher if the commercial plays on network television as opposed to cable, streaming, in theaters, that sort of thing. But whenever you see commercials, somebody's earning money because you're seeing it, meaning those performers that you're seeing are earning money because you're seeing it. And then the same is true with TV. Once you do if you do a TV show, even one episode of a TV show, when it airs, you're going to get a residual check. And if it airs multiple times, you're going to get a check every single time. But it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
Oh, it does get.
Yeah. The first time it's like, oh, that's great. And then the next time it's like, oh, it's a little less. And then it's a little less and a little less and a little less.
Wow. And would you recommend that people, because you said you kind of work for hardly anything, to build, I would think that you're building your portfolio and your resume, you want to do those jobs even if they don't get paid because you're building your experience.
Right. So that all comes back to, the idea of networking. And, you know, a lot of, I think a lot of being a performing artist is making connections with other artists, and those other art, and then you end up, the bigger your community is, you could also call it a community. It's a network, but it's also a community. The bigger your community is, the more access you have to lots of things, right? So, and the thing that is hard to remember when you're very young is that the people that you know now, or that you will know as you're training, are the people you're going to be working with and for later, or hiring later, right? So, and that network, that community of people just keeps expanding and expanding. I oftentimes work for my friends. I oftentimes work for my friends that I've known for a really long time. And they're part of my community, they're part of my network. So it is for sure, I think in the beginning, especially when you're just starting out and you're just trying to find your way, saying yes to as many things as possible for the experience, for the relationships, all those things is really important and useful. And oftentimes those experiences will lead to other things. And it's not like, I don't mean like you're going to do this free job for this choreographer and then they're going to hire you for a big show. That's not exactly what I mean. It can be something that you're not even aware of, in the sense that you get this choreographer asks you to do something for free, and this dancer you've never worked with before, you meet on the job, you become friends, and then they become a choreographer, and then you work for them. You know what I mean? Like it's really expansive, and just the more connections and more community you have, the more fruitful your career can be.
Yeah, I hear that that's the way it is in the entertainment industry as a whole. It's who you know, and you never know. You could be someone's boss one day, and they could be yours another, and or you work together, and someone knows your name, and and networking is so important. I think in every industry, but for sure, your industry, entertainment industry.
Yeah.
So how do you, when you're getting started, how do you support yourself? Because if you're first getting started, you're trying to get those jobs, you're working maybe for low pay or not at all, trying to build your portfolio. What do you do to support yourself financially?
I think that I mean every dancer I know who pursued a career in performing has some sort of side job to start off with until they have a career where they're able to support themselves completely off of performing. And even at that, oftentimes, even at even like currently, I would say the people I know who are working the most right now at this very moment, they all have other things that they do, whether or not they're making money off of it directly, or it's just part of their brand as a professional, and again, building their network and their community even more. But I think that starting out, pretty much everybody has to have something to support them, some sort of second job, whether it is something that is solely for the purpose of supporting you, which means just paying your bills, or if it's something more that requires more of an investment and deserves more an investment. Like I know a lot of people, I wasn't like this, I teach now, but I know a lot of people who through their performing career taught dance as well. And that would be something that obviously, hopefully would be something that would be more than just paying your bills, like waitressing or something like that, So I think that there's multiple ways to do it, but I also think that pretty much everybody I've ever known has had to support themselves in other ways besides just dancing at times, especially because of what I was talking about earlier about the wave, is that even later in your career, I think that's a lot of reasons why people do teach and do other things at the same time, is because it creates stability for them in a career that sometimes feels very unstable.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about your choreography? Like, how did you get into that? Some of your experiences with doing that?
Yeah, I got into it, well, through my career as a performer, I had several relationships and opportunities with choreographers to be their assistant. And I think that's when it first started, because I was working for choreographers as their assistant. I'm sure some of you have seen such relationships. And so when you're somebody's assistant, when you're their assistant choreographer, you are helping them in many ways. You're helping them organizationally. You are communicating on their behalf. You are helping them come up with steps. You are being their body so that they can see what they're trying to create. So, and probably more that I'm missing, but those are some key things that I can think of. But I think that's probably when it started for me, is that I assisted several different choreographers. One in particular, Michael Rooney, who does still choreograph quite a bit actually, who's a commercial choreographer. And then I assisted Wes Veldink in New York, and I assisted Helene Phillips early in my career here in LA. She's one of my mentors. And she was also, I assisted her on some film and a commercial and a few things. And for Michael Rooney, I assisted him on several commercials and TV shows. That's where it started, is probably assisting them. But even then, I really enjoyed assisting them. I knew I was good at it. I had the skills that were necessary to be a good assistant, because not everybody can be a good assistant. But I still wasn't pursuing choreography. I was still really mainly wanted to be a muse. I wanted to perform and be a dancer. So it wasn't probably until later that I started investing more of my artistry into creating in that way. So into choreographing. And it's had many shapes and forms, and it's also moved a little bit into directing, like I said, at ANDA. And choreographing for film and camera are very different as well. So I encourage you, especially if you're creating now on your own, to really like study both platforms and start recognizing the differences and exploring those ideas as you're moving forward.
Yeah. So give me some pros and cons being a dancer. Your favorite best things about being a dancer, and some of the not so great things. So what do you not love or want to change about it?
I'll start with the nots because I like to lean in on the positives. But I would say that the hardest thing is what I already talked about. I think having a career that is unstable is hard for everybody. And I think that it's especially hard for some people. I somehow managed to survive it and also almost thrive in it sometimes, because it can be motivating if you allow it to be motivating. And I also feel like one of the pros of having that kind of career where it is unstable is that things are always changing. And I think if you allow that to be fun, it can be really fun. I like that I can go, even now where I'm in a life that is much more stable, and I'm teaching and I have a family and, all this stuff that's pretty stable and regular. I get really excited when I get to perform because I get to do something new, right? So when I get a job that's performing now, which is less often than when I was younger, I love that I get to change things up, and my days are going to look different for a little bit. And then I'll go back to what my stable life looks like now. But even in my youth, when I didn't have such a stable picture around me, I think that there is something exciting about, meeting new people on every job, being thrown into really challenging new environments all the time and growing as a person, because every job is going to be different. And I liked that about it. The other thing that I would say is just that, like, I think the biggest pro for me, I'm sorry about that. The biggest pro for me is that I got to do and still do what I really love. And I think that's the most important thing. And you can talk about all the cons and having to be resilient and having so many no's and just the instability and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, which is hand in hand with why I've made it this far, is that I just love it so much. I can't imagine doing something else. And everybody I know who has had a career in the performing arts especially loves it because of all of the stuff that you have to make your way through. And I take a lot of pride in, and always talk about it. I talk about it with my son all the time. I want him to have a job when he gets older that he loves, because I love my job so much. I get excited about it. I love talking about it. I love doing it. I miss it when I don't get to dance for a while, all that stuff.
Yeah, that's what I always say, do what you love, and then you figure out how to get paid for it.
Exactly.
Do you have any crazy stories or anything to share with us? Crazy.
Trying to think. Not crazy.
People that you met that were surprising to you, like maybe working with some celebrities or.
I will, this is not going to be nearly as exciting to you guys because I hope that you know who she is, but it's not Beyonce, but because I know you'd be like, Beyonce, and I get it. And I've heard she's amazing and really awesome to work with. She works really hard. But the pre-Beyonce, Tina Turner, I worked for once. And she was quite inspiring and had lots of integrity and was very kind, even though she was a superstar and had people surrounding her, taking care of her, and all that stuff that celebrities do. And I don't, there's just, cause I know speaking to young people that, sometimes we get really hooked and locked into the celebrity of it and who it is. But I find it very interesting that the people that sometimes you're most excited about aren't necessarily the people that are as kind and thoughtful as other people that you'll be really surprised that are just a joy to work for because they're really kind and they have lots of, like I said, have lots of integrity. Like talking about Tina Turner. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
All right. Any other advice you want to tell students about who are thinking about going into dance or choreography as a career?
Just if you're thinking about it, just do everything that you can to continuously cultivate your love for what you do, which I know is what we just talked about. But just remembering why it is that you do what you do. Why do you love dance? Having a clear understanding of that, because no matter who you are, no matter what you do, whether it's dance or not, there are going to be times where you don't necessarily like what you do. There are going to be times where you fall away from what we're headed towards. And I think that the more you can stay on task in the sense of like remembering why you're doing what you're doing and how much you love it and why you love it, that the more success you're going to find and the more enjoyment you're going to get out of the journey. Because it's the journey that's important, not necessarily the end goal. We all have goals and they help motivate us to move towards the direction that we want to go. And sometimes we will reach them and that's going to be awesome. And sometimes we're going to be on our path the way there and something over here is going to turn your head and you're going to realize, oh wait, I want to do that. Or I want to do that too. And that just makes your life more full, right? Staying open, but having goals and working towards something is also motivation and keep on keeping on. Yeah.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, Sophia and Nicholas, do you want to say something? I think you were, Sophia? No? I want to thank you for your time, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. And oh yeah, Sophia, go ahead.
Oh, hi. I just want to say thank you for having us. It was so great. We loved it.
Oh, good. Thank you. Love hearing your voice.
Inspirational. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. I'm happy to hear it.
And if you have any questions for Stephanie in the future, maybe we could share out your email. You could reach out to Miss Carol and we'll get that out to students who are interested in asking other questions.
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with that.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Just to let you all know that all of our Zooms have been posted, are going to be posted by the end of this week. They're all there. Most of them are there now on our College and Career Center website, on the high school website, in the College and Career Center tab under virtual presentations. So I hope you check that out. And it'll be, if you have any friends who want to go into dance, you can direct them there. I'll post that later today. All right. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.